Welcome to the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, your guide to motorsports sponsorship. Here's your host, Josh Weesey.
Welcome to the 64th installment of the Sponsored Rider Club podcast. My name is Josh Weesey. I'm your host. I'm here to guide you through the crazy world of motorsports sponsorship. Tell me that today I have Kirsten Armletter of Snow Riders and Riders West on the podcast. Before we get into that interview, I have a few things to cover with you. First, I would love to get your feedback. I would love to show iTunes that this podcast delivers value and overall engagement from our listeners. So if you would be so kind as to head over to iTunes and leave a rating or review, that would be amazing. I've been reading the reviews on this show, so if you do go ahead and leave one in the future, I will be reading that here. Now, this 5-star rating comes from the Dirty Dooner, Jake Coleman himself, and this rating says, Josh does a great job with this show. I love the content he gets out of the interviewees, and it is awesome how he lets them talk and tell their story. You can gain many things from the show. As a fellow podcaster, it is especially helpful to me because I have learned how to approach new sponsorship relationships. Thanks for the great content, Josh. Keep up the good work. And he said, I especially love the Joey D, Matt Martelli, and Jim Beaver episodes, which is not a surprise because those are some of my favorites as well. Next thing I would ask you to do is whatever podcast player you are on, go ahead and subscribe. That way you don't miss any of our upcoming guests. Now, if you'd like to get some insider access to upcoming guests, go ahead and check out the Sponsored Rider Club on Facebook and request to join. And our next live experience will be airing on March 5th, 2018. It will feature Thomas Affelt of Sledders R Us. Now, Thomas was also on episode 48 of this show, which happened to be one of our top downloaded episodes. And if you missed the live experience with Travis Pointer, it is available now on the Facebook page. It's also available on YouTube and on this podcast as Live 1. So you will be seeing more and more episodes aired live on Facebook and then released in this podcast. Now, this show is brought to you by 4 amazing companies. The first is Solderweld. They produce game-changing metal bonding technology. TopThePodium.com. They're experts in motorsports sponsorship. Bold Racing and Suspension, Family Race Team, and custom suspension experts. And then Armor Coat. They create products that make your cleanup easier. I also want to give a quick shout out to some of our other partners, including MBRP, HMK USA, Studboy Traction, and One Stop Performance. Now, the structure of this podcast, it is set up like a race. You'll begin with the qualifier, which is the basic intro. In Heat 1, we'll dive into Kirsten's background. In Heat 2, we'll discuss sponsorship tactics and strategies. In the main event, we'll chat about mindset, and then we'll end at the finish line where we get closing comments and contact information. Without further ado, let's hop in. All right, well, welcome everybody to the Sponsored Rider Club podcast. Today I'm joined by our featured guest, Kirsten Armletter of Snow Riders and Riders West. So, Kirsten, I'd like you to take a minute to fill in the gaps from that intro and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Hey there, guys. I live in Cranbrook, BC, Canada, which is fairly a small city in the southeastern corner of the province. We're not very far from the Manitoba and Idaho borders. I'm a staff writer, photographer, and social media manager for Snow Riders and Riders West magazine, which is also based here in Cranbrook.
Oh, that's perfect. I always love hearing the multiple hats that people wear in, these companies. Like you just said, social media manager, and the photographer, and the writer. I love hearing that because I think it makes it fun being able to wear multiple hats.
Definitely. It makes every day interesting because you're always doing something different.
Yeah, definitely. Well, one thing I want to give the folks some context on is how you and I actually ended up connecting. So I think you had put up a blog post on sponsorship, snowmobiling sponsorship. I think it ended up on Sledders on Facebook or one of those pages, and a lot of people were commenting and engaging on it, and I read the article and it was awesome. So that's ultimately why I wanted to bring you on is I saw that you had at least enough passion about the topic to, write a solid and, a lengthy article on that. So first off, I appreciate you doing that because that way, we are able to make this connection.
Yeah, I just felt that there's a bit of a disconnect, especially in backcountry snowmobiling, that, people get involved in it and they want to go further and they want the support, but they just don't know where to start. And then once they do start, they realize, maybe this is not what I really want. Mm-hmm. So I felt that, I needed to address that a little bit to kind of guide whoever wanted to read the article along.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, so I appreciate that again. And I think we'll get into some of those topics naturally in this show, and we'll also explore some other ones. So for people listening, if you didn't read that article, I'm sure that you're going to get a lot of the information in this episode. Kirsten, I'd like to dive deeper into your background. I want to understand more about your role and in your story in motorsports altogether. And I know it starts somewhere, so let's go there. Let's go to the point when you really got into the motorsports industry.
Well, it started when I was just a kid. I grew up riding snowmobiles, ATVs, boats, and personal watercrafts. My parents were big into it all, and I rode a lot with my dad growing up. We had an acreage, so we could just leave from the house and go snowmobiling or quadding up the mountain, and so I have lots of really good memories of growing up. After high school, I started working for Snow Riders, and it was more of a data entry clerk. And it kind of evolved into writing. They wanted to keep me on. They didn't know exactly where I fit, so they started throwing writing projects at me. And then from there, it kind of evolved into a variety of things. I did take a hiatus from the magazine and motorsports for a few years and tried a few different things, got some good life experience, and then came back in 2012. And, that was shortly after I also married my husband, and he was big into motorsports his whole life too, so it was kind of a natural fit. And from there, we got heavy into snowmobiling, but more the backcountry side of things, which meant I had to relearn how to ride all over again.
That's the truth. That is so true. I mean, I've been riding snowmobiles my whole life, and when I first went out west, I mean, it was embarrassing. One of the most embarrassing things I've ever experienced. I spent more time. I didn't even know you were supposed to flip snowmobiles over when you got stuck. I didn't know that was a thing, and I didn't know why mountain sleds didn't have windshields. Now I get it, because you always roll them over every 5 minutes. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it went from, sitting down and just burning around on the trails and maybe putting a knee on your seat or to now it's all rider forward, and there's so much technique, and it's really advanced.
Mm-hmm.
Become more fun, I think.
Yeah, it is fun. I was riding with Curtis Fernie, and he's a backcountry rider, and he was basically first thing he told me was there's like several positions, riding positions, and he said this is not one of them, and he sat down on the snowmobile. He's like, this is not considered a riding position, and I was like, what? That's the only one I do.
So much to learn when you come back from it after a bit of a break.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So cool. So high school, you started off, doing odds and ends around the Snow Riders office, and you ended up being a writer. You took a hiatus, you came back. So what happened after that, after you got back?
I just, I really focused on improving my writing and, kind of asking for more responsibilities. And that just kind of evolved naturally on itself where, I still do a ton of the writing, but I also have a lot of the editorial assistant type work where, I work closely with the editor to find content that I think our readers are going to be engaged, and working with writers as well and and with assignments and accepting the assignments and processing the articles, and then as well as attending events too and providing coverage for that. Mm-hmm. So it just has evolved into quite an interesting career.
Oh, that's really cool. One thing that I'm curious about is a comment you just made about getting better at writing. I honestly see a number of people that are sponsored riders or racers that, they have to have some competence around writing when it's, sometimes it's a blog post, but every time they put up a social media post, you have to have some competence there mm-hmm. to be engaging. But so my question for you is, how did you learn or practice to become a better writer?
Well, the key word there is practice. It's, you can study as much as you want, and then it just takes practice. You have to keep on developing your skills and write and write and write. And even just consistently write too. Like, it's the worst thing for a writer to take a break and not write for a week, because when you come back into it, you're like starting all over again. So I think just that, practice, and just there's so much resources on writing on the internet too. So just do your research, and you can learn so much that way. Like you said, that when you're, it doesn't matter if you're writing blogs, you're still a writer. You have to write emails. You have to write texts. You have to write Facebook posts. Like, all of that is writing.
Yeah, that's a very good point. One of the things you said a minute ago was that you had to do the writing, every day or on some cadence, or else you lost it. And it reminded me of a podcast that I listened to a little while back, and the guest was basically being asked, how are they creative? Like, how do they spark creativity? And, do they schedule creativity into their life? And the person said, it was kind of a joke, but what they said was, no, I don't schedule creativity in my life. It just happens to come every single day at 9 a.m.
Yeah, I've read that too. Yeah.
So
that's pretty much true.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I know I've, going back to being in high school, I used to have some competence around writing, and it always shocked people because I ended up being an engineer, so it was like it didn't make sense that I could write. But then once I got in the social media world and created some of my own blog posts, and I realized how far I still had to go. Like the high school A+ don't really translate to an engaging blog post or an engaging email.
That's what I noticed is, I excelled at writing in high school, but then when I got into the real world, it's not like how you study it. You have to take that knowledge that you've learned and then apply it into the real world, and then be adaptable and constantly improve with your writing skills, because you're never going to be a perfect writer. There's always areas that can be improved.
Mm-hmm. I always find intrigue in the headlines of articles, like why do I click on this one? And then I think maybe the articles where I actually finish reading them, like, why did I finish reading this one but not the other one? Mm-hmm. And I don't think I've ever taken the time to dissect all of that, but somebody does, right? That's the people who write the articles that I keep reading. They're the ones that probably know how to keep it engaging.
Yeah, and like you said about headlines is huge. We spend a lot of times just dissecting our headlines and thinking about, what is the proper length? What are people searching for? And then trying to apply all of that, which is really hard, because a lot of times you'll leave it where there's no headline to your story. You'll write your story, and you get to the end of it and you have to write a compelling headline. Well, you're too burnt out to do that. Right. So it's really, it's important to do that at the beginning. But yeah, like you said, it's really interesting to see, why do people read one article over the other?
Mm-hmm. What I'm curious about is, with the articles that you generate with Snow Riders and Riders West, what are the things that you're trying to capture? Like, are you trying to bring them into just an engaging entertainment experience? Are you trying to get them to think differently about the sport? Are you trying to teach and coach? I mean, what's kind of the overall focus there?
It's really a combination of everything with Snow Riders. We're not so much a just hard-hitting news or technology-based magazine. We're more about the community side of things. The riders, the athletes. So we really look for, in every story, try to really dig out the passion side of it and find out why a person got into that specific sport and some of the things that they've had to go through to keep involved in it. So, and it really focuses on the community as a whole. And our audience is primarily Western Canada, so BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, and the Yukon. So yeah, it really community based.
Mm-hmm. Well, one good news is that I think probably about, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but I think like 10 or 15% of our audience is probably around that side of Canada. So, whoop, whoop, for people listening.
Awesome, yeah.
That's good to hear. I want to give a quick shout out here too, because we talked in the pre-interview about this. You just interviewed Blair Morgan, who's like a legend, and he's back on the race scene. If people are listening right now and they want to get connected to that interview, is there a way that can we direct them to that interview?
For sure, yeah. If you just go on to www.snowriderswest.com. It's right there on the homepage right now on his article. So that would be probably the best way to go and read that. But yeah, it's really exciting to see him back on snow, and I think there are a lot of fans across Canada that have stories of seeing him race or even have raced with him too back in the early days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the funny things, for people who don't know, Blair Morgan's number was 7C when he raced. I don't even know what that meant, how he had a little C in his number. But for every standardized test growing up, when I got to question number 7 and I didn't know what the answer was, I automatically just put C. I was like, it's got to be. I mean, I'm talking for years. That's what I just defaulted to C. I was like, whatever. If I get it wrong, at least I know I put 7C on this paper.
That's awesome.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, for people listening, it is February 7th of 2018 right now. So if it's not up on the main page, definitely you can probably search for it and find the article. It should be a good one. All right. Well, the next thing I want to do is jump into Heat 2. Right before that, though, I just want to take a quick minute to thank the sponsors for this podcast. I want you to think long and hard about this. Do you have the ability right now, if something were to break on the trail that's aluminum or radiator or AC line related, can you fix that on the spot? If the answer is no, I actually have a solution for you. It's Solder Weld's Alloy Sol Flux. This product gives you a long-term fix, not like JB Weld that's short-term, that's just going to get you back to the trailer. This one is going to allow you to easily repair an oil cooler, radiator, AC line, or any crack or hole in aluminum, and it's going to do it without the need to clean and decontaminate the surface. Very simple. All you need is MAP gas or propane torch to make this whole thing work. The Alloy Sol rods are actually capable of a 30,000 PSI fix, and essentially that makes them stronger than the parent metal, and they're built to last the lifetime of the part. Now, I don't want you to let a simple radiator leak leave you out of the race or broken down on the trail somewhere. I want you to have the ability to bring along some Alloy Sol aluminum alloy repair rod and flux from Solder Weld. To get yours now, you can use promo code SponsoredRider, that's one word, all lowercase, to get $20 off the aluminum repair rod and flux for the month of February 2018. Just go to solderweld.us and use promo code SponsoredRider. I hear it constantly from racers that a good suspension setup is absolutely critical for performance, and that's why I'm going to talk to you next about Bold Racing and suspension. Now, it's really critical to understand your suspension, and there's so many intricacies with the valving and the shims and all this crazy equipment that you need to actually, rebuild and properly set up your suspension, that it's really important, if you're ready for that next level of performance, to partner with an awesome suspension company. Now, Bold Racing is that company. They're not only specialists with their suspension setups, but they also partner with companies that produce amazing custom components. And on top of that, they're a family race team. They actually race themselves, so they really understand the type of beating that your vehicle and your shocks can take. So what I want you to do is give them a call and just chat with them. Talk to them about suspension. Their number is 702-506-5354. If you're not ready for a phone call, go ahead and shoot them an email, bold.racing@yahoo.com. I am constantly asking the guests of this podcast how they attract and retain sponsors. And on almost every single occasion, somebody gives an example of a resume. A rider or a racer resume is extremely important to your overall sponsorship pitch and proposal. And it's tough to do. I mean, it's not really the easiest thing. Anybody can go through and put together a resume, so don't get me wrong there, but it's really difficult to get something that's like unique and different and stands out, and that also is something that can be put across multiple platforms. Well, that's one of the things that I want to talk to you about next, is how TopThePodium.com can actually help you build a race or rider resume that can be used on multiple platforms. I'm talking like website, PDF, something you can print off that's interactive, that looks fantastic. It looks absolutely professional. Well, that's because it's made by a professional. This is the type of thing that's going to set you apart from the crowd, and that's going to position you for a strong sponsorship proposal. So what I want you to do next is go to TopThePodium.com, and if you have a question, there's a little chat icon that pops up on the side of the screen when you go to TopThePodium.com, and you can go ahead and type your question right there. Jeff Vanestal, he is the owner of Top the Podium. He's going to be able to respond to you directly, so check it out. I don't know about you, but I absolutely can't stand cleaning the mud, filth, grime, goo, garbage off my machines after I go for a ride. It's just frustrating. It takes a lot of time. That's why I'm going to talk to you about Armor Coat next. Armor Coat is designed to help prevent mud, clay, ice, and other grime from sticking to your machine. It makes the cleanup quick and easy. It makes the machine actually look fantastic, and beyond that, it smells phenomenal. I don't know how to describe it, like bubble gum or something like that. It smells great. If you want to know more about Armor Coat, visit ArmorCoatProducts.com, and you will see their entire product line, all the offerings. Armor Coat is also working on some new stuff. They're soon going to release a solution made for coating the helmet and visor, and also one for wheels to help prevent mud buildup for high temp areas. So make your move now. Go to ArmorCoatProducts.com. Make a decision that's going to allow you to shorten the amount of time that you spend cleaning so that you can increase the amount of time that you spend riding and racing. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. We are now in Heat 2, and that's where we talk about, the meat of the podcast, sponsorship tactics and strategies. So, Kirsten, for you, I'd like to talk about sponsors and their influence on the industry. So from your perspective and what you've seen, primarily in the backcountry world, who do you think are the most influential sponsors?
Well, I think first of all that when you're talking about sponsors, you have to mention Red Bull or really any of the sports drink companies, because I think if an athlete has their backing, then they pretty much know that they're on their way. But I don't really know if these companies realize the impact that they have on the industry, because say they choose to support an athlete in a specific or a multiple endeavor that they're going to go after, that could really set a precedent for the sport and everybody who comes after it. So I wonder sometimes if they think about that or just go for it. Yeah. But when we're talking about backcountry snowmobiling, the gear companies like Motorfist or FXR Racing, for example, they really seem to be getting behind a lot of athletes. So, I mean, that's great to see. I think also Polaris is pretty influential right now. They have some products that are really setting a new precedent as well, like the Razor lineup that pretty much took side-by-sides to the next level. And then they also have the Timber Sled brand, and as we all know, snow bikes are the rage right now. So, yeah, Polaris is super influential, but I also think that we're going to start seeing bigger things come from Arctic Cat.
Yeah.
They've always been kind of considered the younger brother, even though they've done a fantastic job. But now with Textron backing them, I think they're going to be the one to go after. So
Yeah.
So in no matter what sport they're involved in, whether it's side by side or snowmobiling, I think there's great opportunity for athletes today to secure really good sponsors.
Yeah, I definitely agree with those industry titans, I guess you'd say. I know that I just ran a poll on the Sponsored Rider Club on Facebook the other day, just asking about the energy drinks alone, and just trying to figure out from people's perception who's tends to be the biggest influence overall in motorsports. And a lot of people said Monster. I think if you expanded it to action sports in general, Red Bull would probably rise to the top, because Red Bull seems to be involved in just every action sports on the planet. But one of the things that you said too was, do they really even know how influential they are? And I don't know. I know one thing I just saw today on social media. There was a post advertising a new movie that was coming out. It was called Dirt, and it was about short course racers, and basically everything you saw in that movie, people were wearing the Rockstar hats, and there was Rockstar posters on the wall, and the truck was a Rockstar truck, and I was like, wow, like they hit it hard with that one. I mean, they're basically putting a movie together, and that's wild though, how big of an impact it is, because I'm assuming that from everything I saw, that they had a pretty big financial stake in that movie in general.
Yeah, Rockstar's another one too that I think they've gotten behind more of the motocross side of things, and really supported motocross efforts in maybe central to eastern Canada more than we see it out here in the West. But yeah, they're definitely one that has a big influence, and can continue to have a big influence on where the sport goes from here.
Definitely. Yeah, and the other one that you said, especially in the backcountry, when we're talking about the gear manufacturers, so HMK, Motorfist, Climb, FXR, that's one of the first logos I feel like I see on every sled, every backcountry sled. I mean, they're everywhere, and every time I've talked to those companies like HMK, I've been working with HMK now for a couple months, and I've worked with Motorfist a little bit in the past, and they're all awesome. They're just, they're really dedicated to making good products, and they care a lot about their sponsored riders as well.
Yeah, and it's great to see that. I know especially Motorfist, they've really tried to focus a lot on people who foster the safety culture in the snowmobiling, and especially in backcountry snowmobiling. But so that's really great to see that they're being influential in directing the sport toward positivity. Yeah.
One of the interesting things that kind of blew my mind when I started learning more and more about the gear manufacturers, especially if you look at Motorfist and Climb, I mean, they're both from the same small town in Idaho, like Rigby, Idaho. That's where they're, I don't know if you want to call it headquartered or whatever. I mean, that's where they grew up, and it's wild when you think about that there's industries kind of can spawn out of a small spot.
Definitely. And I don't think we realize how well connected the industry is too. Like, a lot of these companies are well connected, and they actually work together a lot more than we realize. We just think that they're competitors, but yeah, they kind of flow together better.
And a lot of them are like related even. So for example, I found out through this podcast, I work with MBRP. They're one of the sponsors for, my program, and I've also had the folks from GGB Exhaust on here, but the owners are brothers. The owner of GGB is brother is MBRP, and they started out of the same garage. I was like, man, how did that happen? That's incredible.
Yeah, even the big OEMs, the sled manufacturers too, if you really go back into how they got started, there's a lot of crossovers and, employees just breaking off and starting a new snowmobile company. It's surprising now, but yeah, that's very connected.
And one last note that I wanted to pull out of that was you made a comment about Textron and their dedication in the industry. I agree with that. I talked to a number of the OEM representatives at a Novi, Michigan snow show in 2017, and one of them was the Textron folks, and their display was pretty impressive. They put a lot of investment into the display. I would say more than the other manufacturers, which did surprise me. And I talked to a number of the reps there, and they sounded like they were ready to make some significant changes. So I'm excited to see where that whole thing's going to go.
Me too. Yeah, it'll be really great, I think, for the whole industry as a whole, because if one manufacturer starts pushing, then it pushes the other ones, and it just advances technology. And then Motorfist will feel that too, because they were an Arctic Cat company. So yeah, it's really good for the whole industry.
Certainly. Do you know this? Is Motorfist, did they are they now part of Textron, or are they separate now?
I'm not 100% sure on that, but the last time, and it was just after Textron purchased, and I talked to one of their reps there at Motorfist, and she was very excited that that they had that backing. So I just assumed that the Textron took on Motorfist as well, but not. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I would say I wasn't sure. The last time I had really talked to the folks at Motorfist, at that time, the acquisition hadn't gone through yet. So.
Okay. Yeah.
That's good. We talked about the sponsors in the industry that are doing great, but what is it that you think they actually need? I mean, if these companies are so successful, or they've got things figured out, why do they take the time to sponsor riders, and what are they trying to get out of that?
Well, it's all word of mouth. They can push a product or market it as much as they want, but they need actual people out there testing and riding the product and talking to other people about how it works. They need company, or they need brand ambassadors to really be spokespeople for their product. And I think that these ambassadors, first and foremost, need to be true believers in the product that they're being sponsored by, and knowledgeable about it as well, so that when they do get asked about the product, the response won't be, I don't know, it was free, go to their website, but they're able to answer the questions. A good brand ambassador, in my opinion, knows the product well and will be able to answer questions about how it's designed and how it works. And if for some reason the product doesn't work well, or there needs improvement, the brand ambassador shouldn't be afraid to really contact their sponsor to let them know where there's room for improvement. And if the sponsor is really interested in getting the product out there, then they want and they need that feedback. They also need their goals to be aligned with the brand ambassador's goals as well, which was one of the things that I brought out in that article you referred to, is that it's important from the beginning to select the right sponsors and, vice versa.
Yeah, one of the things that you had mentioned was knowledge of the product and how that can be very beneficial. I'll tell you one really good example that I just saw the other day was George Hamill. He was on episode 23 of this podcast. He's a UTV racer, and he works with one of the sponsors for this podcast as well, which is Solderweld. And he was with the owner of Solderweld, Lance Robinson, in his garage or a shop, a workshop, and he was explaining. It wasn't Lance, the owner of Solderweld. George was explaining and showing how to conduct a repair on a damaged radiator using this alloy sol rod and flux that Solderweld makes. And it was a short video, but basically they took a perfectly good radiator, put a big old hole in it, and then fixed it. But George was explaining it, and I thought that was phenomenal. It had a lot of engagement on it, a lot of people asking questions, a lot of people like, "Whoa, what is this stuff? Where can I get it from?" And I thought that was a really cool thing of George, and for George to do. I mean, I was like, this is a perfect example. But then I stepped in, and I've got a special promo code for Solderweld, and for February, hey, use this, you get $20 off, and I posted that on there, and people were like, oh my gosh, this is phenomenal. So it was just, I think that's a good way where you don't even know it's happening at the time, but really George was giving a really good sales pitch for that product. And then he believed in it. Like, he truly believed. You could see in his face, like, he's like, how could I not use this right now? This is amazing.
Right, and if you truly believe in the product, it's going to come out too. It's just going to be natural. You want to talk about it. We use the term, and I think it's a marketing term, but we use influencers. So these are people who are key authorities in the industry, and if you can spot them, it's really beneficial to align yourself with them. Like we've even done that with the magazine too. Like we see an influencer and they happen to be able to write as well, which works out fantastic. And so we really want to get them on board. And because we know that even if we're not asking them specifically to, after you write the article, make sure you share it with your followers and stuff, but they'll just do that, and that's huge. That just builds trust, and they're doing that for us, which I think is the same as a sponsor.
Yeah, definitely. What do you look for in an influencer?
Well, the obvious is kind of how many followers they have on social media, and quality of followers too, and what they're posting, if you can see that, and somebody who's not just into it for their own personal gain, but is heartfelt about the betterment of the community and the sport. So those are the kind of people that we like to align ourselves with.
That set of criteria is very similar, just like you said, it's very similar to what sponsors look for. They might even list the same things. They're trying to find influencers, just like you said, and that's how they find them. I mean, honestly, when I select guests for the show, I mean, that's part of it. I'm trying to find people who have influence over others, because I want them to say something on the show and then have another person listen to it, and that person actually say, oh, well, if they're saying it, maybe I should listen.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that's helpful. And social media following, if you look at somebody's social media and that has high engagement, just like you said, where it's a quality of followers, that means people are listening. And you can tell by looking at comments. If you see somebody who posts something, they've got a lot of likes but no comments, like, well, maybe they're not listening as much. Or if it's just a picture and there's no information and there's well, maybe they're not saying as much right there, but sometimes you see people who are like, oh, wow, everything they're saying seems to be getting taken in. For example, I released episode 61 with Christine GZ of Dynamic Racing, and if you look through her Instagram feed or Facebook, everybody's like, oh, I love you so much, like, this is such a great content, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's emotion built into that.
Definitely.
That person's an influencer. And, I think those are just some good examples that you can actually quantify as well.
Can you imagine going back to pre-social media and trying to find people?
No,
I don't know. I don't know how we used to do it. I don't know how magazines and companies interested in looking for brand ambassadors and stuff. I don't know how they did it.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
It's so much. I don't necessarily want to say easier, but it's more accessible to look at, find people, and then kind of gauge their personality and their goals too via their social media posts. Yeah.
I asked a question like this. This is going way back in time. It was episode 3 with Mike Penland, and Mike Penland he's been racing for like a billion years, and he basically said, back in the day it was like you got your stickers on your machine and you win races. Like that's how you get noticed, is that winning a race. And that's not true anymore, but there's so many other ways. I mean, someone like Larry Enticer, right? People don't know Larry Enticer by now. You need to Google him right away. But Larry Enticer, he went from like 0 social media following. He's got like 500,000 followers, and it's, I don't know, maybe been a year. And that would not have happened pre-social media or 10, 15 years ago. Like, it just would not have happened. And he would never have been noticed. And now he has more influence than the majority of the racers that people sponsor right now. It's incredible.
Yeah, pre-social media, he would just be a guy on a old Enticer burning around a field.
Right.
But like you said, because of social media, he's able to get out there, and I think people really connect with him because of the craziness.
Yeah.
And
yep.
Yeah.
And I'm curious too of when the transition happened, where it went from, like, social media at one point was, you mentioned easy. I think there was a point where it was a lot easier, and then it got flooded. And now we're running out of space on social media for content, and everybody's a content producer now to some extent, because they hold in their hands this magical device that gives them access to all the information in the world. And everybody creates content, and everybody's social media pages are filled. And I think it's now, I don't know, like I said, maybe as a year ago, I don't know when it exactly happened, but we're now at a point where it's hard again to get noticed because of just the sheer volume of content that's out there.
Right. Yeah. No, I think I definitely agree with you on that. And I don't know when that turning point came, but it's just, there's so much on there that I almost feel bad for new athletes coming up.
Yes.
How do you get through all that and get noticed?
Mm-hmm. I think that there's something different coming. I mean, live video is an extension of social media, and I think that's gonna be a game changer still. It's, it started to. I know a lot of people that that follow this podcast and that talk with me, that they're getting into live videos a lot more. But there's going to be something else that's going to come. I don't know if we'll ever replace social media, but there's something else that's going to come that's going to give people access that we just can't imagine right now. And that's going to be, when that happens, people listening, they need to get on whatever that train is.
Yeah, whatever it is going to change the game once again.
If I figure it out, I'll let people know. But, like, geez, oh Pete's, it could be anything. I don't know. Okay. What about athletes? Are there specific athletes that that you think are doing a really good job that maybe people listening can follow and, take notes on and emulate?
Well, the first one that comes to mind is Cody Matichuk, and he's from Cochrane, Alberta, here in Canada. So yeah, he's only been on snow bikes for about 3 seasons, and he's already one of the biggest names in the sport, with a bronze from X Games last year and now a gold medal from X Games last month. And yeah, he's got the results, but he's backed by some big brands now, including Yamaha and the Yeti Snow MX. I think what's made him successful is his sick talent, of course, but he's also his mindset to sponsorships and building his brand. You can see that right from the start. Like he's been involved in the motorsports industry since he was a kid, so he's on more the motocross side of things. So he's got that bit of an advantage, but he just seemed to have a good business plan from the start before he was even recognized in the snow bike industry. When I first bumped into Cody Matichuk, he had a website all up with all the information that would help media like myself and sponsors just at a glance go, whoa, this guy is serious about his business plan and all these, he's done all these accomplishments. This is his background. This is an easy way to get a hold of him. Boom. It's a no-brainer. So I think that he's one that definitely stands out.
Yeah, and I like the website thing too. A lot of people do have websites, a lot of people don't. It's getting it's gotten much easier to create a website. One of the things that I found that was super intriguing when I interviewed Christine GZ, I just mentioned her a little bit earlier in episode 61, she puts a copy of her resume on her website. So you can download the PDF and go through it, and it is, it's an impressive resume. But I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah.
I think that everybody focuses a little bit too much on social media that, okay, I have a Facebook page. I don't need a website. But I still think that you need that website if you're really serious about it. And like you said, it's gotten easier and more affordable to build your own website. But even then, if you can't do it yourself, there are quite a few companies that you could hire to do that. So I think that just takes it another step up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually something when you mention other companies like TopThePodium.com, they've been sponsoring this podcast since episode 6 or something. And that's one of the things that they offer. Man, that is sweet to be able to have somebody do that for you. I mean, I've built some websites. I mean, it's all templates and things like that, but it's still a lot of work.
It is, yeah.
And you get into this zone of tweaking and modifying and whatnot, but even in the end, if you don't do all that and if you just put something basic together with some of the templates that are out there, you can get a decent looking website in a very, very short period of time for a pretty low cost.
Definitely, yeah, and just keep it simple too. It doesn't have to be too crazy. Just be a front door resume that people can find online, and make it easy to approach you too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm definitely a fan of the website still. I think it just gives you at least that other avenue, whether it's for search engine optimization. People just search your name on Google. That's one more thing that pops up outside of just social media. The other thing, and I don't think that I'm one of the people that is nervous about Facebook just one day ending or Instagram just one day ending or anything like that, but there is some risk with having everything on a platform that you don't control.
Right, yeah.
I mean, trust me, I got a lot invested time-wise and content-wise into my social media, and I love it. But there is a little bit of risk there if Facebook one day, and they've done it, Facebook one day, if they decide we're just going to change the way we do things, and then all of a sudden you have a huge impact. Where with a website, obviously there may be still some risk, but you own the structure of that website to a pretty high extent.
Right. It's with a website. It's a paid platform that you in essence have bought. You've bought the domain for that. You've bought their website, so you own that content. But like you said, with Facebook, they could just decide to go, meh, we're not going to do this anymore, and then delete it all, and all your hard work is gone. So yeah, no, I think you're right there.
So you're a content creator, at heart, and that's what you spend a lot of your time doing. So from your perspective, what do you think the riders and racers out in the world, what should they be doing to create engaging content themselves?
I think they need to definitely stay up to date with the industry, know what others are doing. But the big thing is remembering that it's not always about you, which I think Facebook and social media breeds narcissism.
Yeah.
It is all about us, but taking the time to just interact with your followers and your fans, maybe even take the time to provide them with some tips. Like you might think that you're giving away trade secrets, but you're actually establishing that trust there, and you'll be recognized as an authority, and more people will come to you. And your sponsors will also like that too, because like we talked about earlier, you're pretty much doing the advertising for them. Look at what kind of content other people in your sport are sharing, and then really try to find the areas that they're missing and go for that.
I've seen a couple of things recently that some backcountry sledders have done that I felt was some pretty good examples of that. So one, Chris Brandt, he's probably one of the top, if not the top, backcountry rider out there. And I've seen him do videos with, he's a Polaris brand ambassador, and I've seen him do videos where he's showing people how to take off the clutch and, do belt adjustments, and he's going through technical videos, which I think is pretty cool. I've also seen Tony Jenkins, he was on this show. I think it was episode 19.
Right. Yeah.
He does avalanche safety. He does videos on avalanche safety quite a bit. And, he shows, here's how you actually do it, and here's, this area, and you should be cautious in this area, and you see a lot of engagement on that, so people are learning, and I think you even mentioned it earlier, that's what a lot of the brands are promoting as well as avalanche safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's so fantastic to see that it takes a lot of time for those athletes to, just create a video, or even just take the time to do a live video on their Facebook and share those tips. Like, they don't have to, but they are deciding to, and it really builds trust and makes them an even bigger influencer. And then, yeah, it's so great from a sponsor's standpoint as well.
Definitely. From the sponsorship standpoint, what do you think are some of the challenges that the industry might be facing right now?
Well, we talked quite a bit about social media. So I think that the biggest thing is just cutting through all the clutter. It's, on social media, and especially in backcountry snowmobiling, it seems that everyone's got some sort of support from a company, and most are doing a really fantastic job of promoting their sponsor. But after a while, I think, people who are the prospective customer, who the sponsor is trying to reach with their ambassador, kind of start to turn a blind eye. They not knowing, who do I believe? Or what product is better. It just seems to be that everybody is doing and saying the same thing. So I think it also makes it difficult for racers who are really serious with professional platforms to be seen and heard and rise through that clutter. So I think that brand ambassadors, riders, and racers, they're going to have to look for new ways to stand out and be heard, While on the flip side, the sponsors are going to have to be a little bit more choosy on who they sponsor, or even have more specific guidelines for their ambassadors. Like, this is what I want you to share, or just more of a plan that way. I think that is probably one of the biggest challenges facing the sponsorship.
Yeah, that makes me think of a post that I saw recently, which I even interacted with. It was somebody asked, like, "Hey, what's the best gear out there right now? I mean, what should I buy next?" And their message was flooded with the different brands, and I know I took part in it. I got HMK stuff. I switched I had Arctic Cat brand clothing for years, and I switched to HMK, and I'm like, I love it. And I posted under that, I switched to HMK, and I love it. But then I was looking at the other posts, I'm like, dang, I am just one of many. I don't know how many people, 60, 80, 100 people commented on that. And yeah, a bunch of people said HMK, a bunch of people said Climb, a bunch of people said Toby, a bunch of people said Motorfist. And then I dug into a couple of them. I was like, dang, all these people are sponsored by, like, of course they're going to mention the brand that they're sponsored by. I mean, that's
right.
One, they believe in the brand. That's why they're sponsored by them. And two, they probably feel somewhat obligated. And that's got to be a problem, because now that person who asked the question, what are they doing? Are they just counting like the number of people who said HMK and the number of people who said Motorfist, and whichever one was higher, that's the one they're going to pick? Or I don't know. That's a tough one. That's a tough one.
Yeah, and all the companies make excellent products. Like, I've tried a variety of different brands, and even what I ride in now, it's FXR boots and a Climb jacket and Motorfist bibs. So like, it's a combination, and I've chosen those specific products because I like the bibs for what they do, and I like the jacket for what it does. But it just depends on the rider too. Like, if you're a more petite woman, then maybe one brand is better than the other, or if you're quite a hefty guy, then you'll find, maybe this brand isn't good for you, and you'll have to go to a different. So I think that in that case, the brand ambassadors would do well to just reach out to that person and say, well, what's your physique? Like, what's your body type? Do you like a stiffer material, or do you like a softer material? What kind of riding do you do? Like, more, and then find the product that will fit that person's needs and their physique as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. I do think that is a challenge in the industry. I also feel like another one that may be kind of linked to that is just the number of options that are available now. When we look at, again, like the gear manufacturers, there's a lot of gear manufacturers out there, and it's kind of hard to make a decision sometimes. Like, I'm imagining somebody who's a backcountry rider, they've got a lot of talent. They have a friend who's a photographer, and they're getting some good content out there, building social media. How do they even know which company to contact? Like, who do you go to first? Do you mass blast them all and just hope for the best? You pick one that you like the most. If you really like Climb gear, do you start with them? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, me neither. I think just do as much research as you can, and reach out to people that, maybe you've narrowed it down to a couple of brands, and just reach out to a couple of people that are promoters of that brand, and just ask them what they like about it and what they don't. Because, there's some things that we just don't like with some brands, and that's fine. So I think that just looking out for the people who are approaching the market brand new is kind of a big thing too.
Wow, we did a lot in that sponsorship category. I feel like we covered a lot of things that I wanted to. What I want to kind of move on to, though, is the main event, and just quickly discuss mindset. we'll probably breeze through this. There's one question that I really like to focus on when I'm breezing through the mindset portion of this podcast, and that's around, direction and next steps for the interviewee's career. So from your standpoint in motorsports, I mean, what do you feel like is going to be your future focus? What do you feel like your next steps are?
That's a tough question to answer. I don't really know at this point. It kind of depends on the sport. My primary focus, snowmobiling and snow biking, they've made such huge progress in the last few years that I kind of just have to wait and see. But I do enjoy the social media side of things and really trying to find better ways and new ways to interact with readers and athletes. So I can kind of see it going down that avenue a little bit more. And then also the editor duties, content coordination that I've taken on in the last few years really have me in control of more content, which, isn't a bad thing. It's enjoyable that way. So, I just kind of have to wait and see. But I think that if you want something, then it'll just naturally come to you, or you'll kind of work things in your life toward that specific path.
Mm-hmm. I like to offer some context as to why I asked that question. And I think people, whether you're a rider or a racer or a student or a teacher or whatever, like anything in the world, I feel like that's a tough question and I feel people get hung up and they get stressed out by it. And I think that from a mindset standpoint and preparing yourself mentally for sponsorship standpoint, it is good to think about that question so that one, that it's okay to be uncertain. It's okay to have some ambiguity and not exactly know what's next. But two, if you can get even the slightest bit of direction or certainty or goals written out, then you know what's your next step to take, and that helps keep things going and keep you getting better every day.
Definitely, yeah. Like I'm a big follower of or a believer in the power of positivity, and which teaches you to be really specific about your goals and write them down. And the more specific you can get, the better. So yeah, like you said, it's really good to have that written down in advance and move toward that.
Yeah, what I like to encourage people to do, whether it's on the show or just in personal life, is if you're not sure what's next, take a guess. Try something, because and if you can't get specific right away, don't get stressed out. Start vague, then start making it more and more specific. And in my day job, I'm a manager, and that's something I see other managers not do. Like, they'll get so stressed out about making their goals for the team so specific and amazing that they never actually create the goals for the team. And that's not the point. So if you need this, I feel like the best way to do it is just start. Just write something down. Mm-hmm. It's okay if it starts up ambiguous. And then, to your point, if you really want to get some power out of it, you make it specific and then, measurable. And I think there's a word for it: SMART objective: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. If you can write down a goal or something, about what your next steps are that meet those SMART criteria, you're golden. You're gonna hit it. You're gonna hit it. So
it's the same as building a business plan when you're starting a business as an entrepreneur too. You kind of you sit down and you outline the steps and the timeline of what you hope to accomplish. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to follow that, but it just kind of gives you some tangible goals to work towards and an outline. And then it just helps guide you along the way.
Definitely. And I liked what you said about entrepreneur, because if you don't know it by now, it's my time that you hear it. If you're a sponsored rider or a racer, whatever, you are an entrepreneur to an extent. That's,
Definitely.
you're running a business. You have you have obligations to companies. You're building a brand. I mean, that's an entrepreneur. So a lot of the same methods and tactics and strategies apply. I want to give one quick shout out to somebody who, has that entrepreneurial mindset, and I think would probably answer this question in a very engaging way, and that's Scott Sparrow. He's a backcountry rider, but also he's gotten into Facebook Live and stuff on social media, and he does a show called Driven, and it's basically like a motivational, personal development type show. But if you ask Scott when he first started doing it, which I was talking to him when he was getting it started, I said, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to talk about? He's like, I don't know yet. Kind of let the audience figure it out. I'm like, what? You don't know? You're going to do a show. You don't even know what you're going to do yet? Oh, man, just kind of see where things take. And, he told the same thing to me. For people who don't know, they may have seen some of my social media posts, but I purchased some equipment recently to start getting into live videos with at least a hint of professionalism. And I was talking to Scott. I was like, "What do you think, man? What should I do? You're kind of like the expert now on this thing." And he's like, "Just go live. Like, don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Just see where the audience takes it." I was like, "Ooh, man, I don't know if I can do that just yet, but I think that's a good mentality to have."
Yeah, I think he has a point there, because you can approach it and you can have a perfectly curated, edited, on point Facebook page and with videos that are just fantastic, but you have to show a little bit of your human side. You have to be a little bit vulnerable. And yeah, when you're talking about Scott, it reminds me of Chris Brown too, a big-time backcountry snowmobiler from Whistler, and he's been on the live using Facebook Live, and it's great because you really see the other side of his personality and what conditions are like, and he's not faking any of it. So yeah, I think there's a little bit of a balance to achieve there.
Yeah, and another thing that I just thought of, going back to Scott's example, I read this book called The Lean Startup. It's written by Eric Ries, and in that he talks about something called a minimum viable product. And that book is all about starting a business and launching that business. And the minimum viable product is basically the thing that the customer actually wants in the simplest version of that. And to Scott's point, Scott's basically saying, well, I'm just going to put something out there and let the audience decide what it is. What this book is all about is saying, make sure that your audience actually wants what you're trying to create. Because if you go through this whole, like if right now, let's say I invested 10 grand into, I did not do this, but let's say if I did, invested 10 grand into a studio and all this fancy Facebook Live stuff, and I, curated all these different things, and nobody listened to it, and nobody watched it, and nobody cared, and nobody shared it. Oh, well, okay. Maybe I should have thought a little bit more ahead of time of what the content was actually going to be before I put out there. I should have put out a minimum viable product at that point, right?
Right, yeah. That's just thinking about your audience is so important. And I think as writers, or for me anyway, I constantly have to remind myself that, because you were like, oh, this is so interesting, and why won't people just love this article? And then you put it out there and you get no response. You're like, what? That was so good. And then you go after an article that you're like, kind of ho-hum about, but then it gets a huge response. So you just have to take yourself out of the picture a little bit and think about what does your audience really want. It may not always be what you want or think is best.
Right. Completely agree. Well, that was good stuff. At this point, though, we're going to wrap things up at the finish line. But I want to close it out with one recommendation, or just something that you feel like the audience really needs to take away from this conversation.
I think that, sponsorship is a big responsibility. It's like we use the term entrepreneur. So you are building a business and your brand is you. But if you're truly interested in going after it and having your goals and career aligned with your sponsor's goals, then don't be afraid to ask, and ask again, and maybe ask again. And then when you do get a sponsorship, just follow through on your promises there and deliver and be honest. And I think it'll work out good.
Perfect. What's the best way that listeners can connect with you?
Facebook is probably the best way. Or you can find me on Instagram at Legersmith. And it's probably the best way. Just send me a message anytime or talk snowmobiling. I'm pretty open to that.
Sounds great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to share your experience, not only in your blog post and with, Snow Riders and Riders West, but also for coming on this podcast for an hour and talking to everybody. It's phenomenal that you're able to do that and share, your background.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Perfect. Well, at this point, we're going to close things out. Have fun and ride safe. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Sponsored Rider Club podcast. I hope you're getting value from this show. Put a lot of effort into it so that you can learn better ways to market yourself and drive value for your sponsors. If you'd be so kind as to go on iTunes and leave a rating and review, that would be phenomenal. It definitely helps this show gain traction. And whatever podcast player you use, go ahead and subscribe. That way you don't miss any upcoming guests. If you ever have a question or a guest recommendation, go ahead and shoot me an email directly, podcast@impactfuel.org. A special thanks for this show goes out to our sponsors, Armor Coat, Solderweld, Bold Racing, and TopThePodium.com. Additionally, just a quick shout out to our other product sponsors, MBRP, HMK USA, Studboy Traction, and One Stop Performance. Make sure that you're following us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And it is more important than ever now to follow us on Facebook because that way you can be a part of the live experiences that take place there. I look forward to serving you again next week. Until then, have fun and ride safe.